The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Nexus Academy. The school sat on Valoria Prime, one of the most peaceful worlds in the galaxy. Here, the children of diplomats and leaders came to learn about the universe and how to work together. Jake Martinez walked through the tall halls, his boots making soft sounds on the smooth floor. He was the only human at the academy, part of an exchange program that brought students from different worlds together. Most aliens had never seen a human before Jake arrived 3 months ago. The other students watched him as he passed. He was shorter than most of them and looked weak compared to their strong bodies. His skin was pale, and his brown eyes seemed too small. The aliens whispered to each other about how strange he looked. Jake did not mind their stares. He had grown used to being different. On Earth, humans learned to adapt to new places quickly. It was part of their nature. He entered the advanced xenobiology classroom and took his usual seat in the back corner. The room was large with white walls and huge windows that showed the academy gardens. Strange plants from dozens of worlds grew in neat rows outside. His classmate Zara floated to her seat near the front. She was a Velthari, made of living crystal, that changed colors based on her feelings. Right now she glowed soft blue, which meant she was calm and ready to learn. Her people spoke through light patterns instead of sounds. Crix clicked across the floor on his 6 legs. The Manthari looked like a giant insect with thin arms and big compound eyes. His people valued logic above everything else. They made decisions based on facts, not emotions. Other students filled the room. There was Pip, a small furry creature, whose people lived in trees. Next to him sat Gornax, whose rocky skin came from a world with heavy gravity. Each student represented a different species and world. Professor Thylin entered the room with his usual slow walk. The Aquari moved like he was still underwater, which made sense since his people lived in oceans. His wet skin glistened under the lights, and his large eyes could see things humans could not. Today we will study symbiotic relationships, Professor Thylin said in his deep voice. Water dripped from his mouth as he spoke. Can anyone tell me what this means? Crix raised one of his thin arms. It means 2 different species that help each other survive. Correct, the professor said. On my homeworld, small fish clean parasites from larger sea creatures. Both species benefit. The small fish get food, and the large creatures stay healthy. Jake listened carefully and took notes in his small book. His handwriting was neat and precise. He wrote down every detail, even things that seemed unimportant to others. Zara's crystal body turned yellow, the color of curiosity. She asked, Professor, do all species have these relationships? Most do, Professor Thylin replied. Even predators have symbiotic partners. Nature rarely works alone. Jake looked up from his notes. What about apex predators? Do they need partners too? The question made the room quiet. Something in Jake's tone made the other students uncomfortable, though they could not say why. Professor Thylin studied the human for a moment before answering. Even apex predators have relationships with other species, though their partnerships can be more complicated. The class continued with discussions about different worlds and their ecosystems. Jake asked many questions about hunting patterns and survival strategies. His questions were smart but detailed in ways that made others shift in their seats. When the lesson ended, students gathered their things and headed to lunch. Jake packed his books slowly, letting others leave first. He preferred to eat alone, rather than face the awkward silence that happened when he joined other tables. The cafeteria was filled with the sounds of different languages and the smells of food from many worlds. Jake got his tray and found an empty table near the large windows. His meal looked strange to alien eyes. Meat, vegetables, and fruits that most species would never eat together. Zara approached his table, her crystal form shifting to nervous green. She had been curious about the human since he arrived but had never spoken to him alone. May I sit? She asked through the light patterns on her body. Jake looked up and nodded. Sure. She sat across from him, her light pattern still showing. Uncertainty. I wanted to ask about your homeworld, Earth. What is it like? Jake chewed his food slowly before answering. It is different from here, more dangerous. Dangerous how? Everything there tries to kill you, Jake said simply. The weather can freeze you or burn you. There are creatures that hunt other creatures, plants that poison you. Even tiny things you cannot see can make you sick. Zara's colors shifted to worried orange. How do your people survive? We learn to be better at surviving than anything else. The way Jake said it made Zara uncomfortable. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that her instincts did not like. She changed the subject quickly. The academy is much safer. We have security systems that protect us from any danger. Jake nodded and continued eating. That is good. Safety is important. But as he spoke, his eyes moved around the cafeteria, noting exits and watching how people moved. It was a habit he did not realize he had, something all humans did without thinking. After lunch, Jake went to his next class. The day passed like many others. Lessons about galactic history, mathematics that worked across different number systems, and art from various cultures. Jake was a good student who never caused trouble. As evening came, he returned to his small room in the student housing building. The room was simple, with a bed, desk, and window that looked out over the academy grounds. Jake had added few personal items, some books, a photo of Earth, and a small plant his mother had given him. He sat at his desk and opened his journal. Every night he wrote about his day and his thoughts about living among aliens. Tonight he wrote about symbiotic relationships in Professor Thylan's lesson. The other students seem to think predators are bad, he wrote. But on Earth, predators keep balance. Without them, other animals would eat all the plants and then starve. Predators serve a purpose. He paused and looked out his window at the peaceful gardens. Everything on Valoria Prime was calm and ordered. There were no natural predators, no real dangers. It was so different from Earth, where humans had fought to survive for thousands of years. Jake closed his journal and got ready for bed. Tomorrow would be another day of classes and careful conversations with classmates who found him interesting, but strange. He did not mind being different. Humans were used to adapting to new environments. As he lay in bed, Jake listened to the quiet sounds of the academy at night. It was peaceful here, almost too peaceful. On Earth, such silence would mean danger was coming. But here, it just meant another safe night on a safe world. He closed his eyes and went to sleep, not knowing that tomorrow would be very different from all the days that came before. The next morning started like any other at Nexus Academy. Students moved through the halls talking about their studies and upcoming tests. The peaceful atmosphere of Valoria Prime made everyone feel safe and calm. Jake walked to his advanced xenobiology class, carrying his books and notes. He had spent the night reading about predator behavior patterns, finding the subject more interesting than his classmates realized. The information would prove useful sooner than he expected. Professor Thylan was already in the classroom when students arrived. His wet skin looked more pale than usual, and his large eyes seemed worried. But he began the lesson as normal, talking about how different species worked together in nature. Today we will discuss parasitic relationships, the professor said. These are different from symbiotic ones. In parasitic relationships, one species benefits while the other is harmed. Zara raised her crystal hand, her body glowing with curious yellow light. Are there examples in space travel? Yes, Professor Thylan replied. Some species attack ships and take what they need without giving anything back. They are parasites on galactic society. Jake wrote notes but also watched the professor carefully. Something was wrong. The equari kept looking at the door and checking his communication device. His webbed hands shook slightly when he thought no one was watching. Halfway through the lesson, loud alarms began ringing throughout the academy. Red lights flashed in the hallways, and an automated voice spoke over the intercom system. Attention all students and faculty. The academy is now in lockdown mode. Please remain in your current locations. Do not attempt to leave your rooms or classrooms. This is not a drill. The alien students looked at each other with confusion and growing fear. They had never heard these alarms before. Valoria Prime was supposed to be the safest world in the galaxy. Professor Thylan moved to his desk and activated his communication screen. His face grew more worried as he read the message that appeared. His hands began to shake more visibly. "What is happening?" Crix asked, his logical mind trying to process the unusual situation. The professor looked at his students with sad, frightened eyes. "There has been a security breach. A dangerous criminal has escaped from the maximum security prison on Kepler Station. His name is Vex Shadowclaw." Several students made sounds of fear. Even species that did not know much about galactic criminals had heard of Vex Shadowclaw. He was famous for hunting the children of important leaders and politicians. His methods were cruel, and he enjoyed causing terror before he killed his victims. "Why would he come here?" Pip asked in his small, squeaky voice. "This academy has students from many powerful families," Professor Thylan explained. "The children of council members, ambassadors, and military leaders all study here. For someone like Vex, this place is full of valuable targets." Jake continued taking notes, but now he was writing different things. He drew quick sketches of the classroom layout, marking exits and potential hiding places. His movements were smooth and quiet, unnoticed by his panicked classmates. The professor tried to continue the lesson to keep everyone calm. He talked about how some parasites could be fought off by strong immune systems, but everyone could tell he was scared and just trying to distract them. Time passed slowly. The alarms stopped ringing, but the red lights kept flashing. No one came to tell them what was happening or when the lockdown would end. The students grew more nervous as minutes turned to hours. Then the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting came on, casting strange red shadows across the room. The normal white walls looked dark and threatening. Outside, the beautiful gardens were hidden in darkness. A scratching sound came from above their heads. Something was moving in the ceiling, crawling through the ventilation system. The sound moved from one end of the room to the other, then stopped directly over their heads. All the students looked up at the ceiling tiles. Even Crix, who usually stayed logical in any situation, seemed scared. Zara's crystal body flickered. Through rapid color changes, unable to settle on any single emotion, Professor Thylan positioned himself between his students and the ceiling. His amphibian body was not built for fighting, but he was ready to protect the young beings in his care. "Two." Scratching sound came again, closer and more deliberate. Whatever was up there was big and moving with purpose. Dust fell from the ceiling tiles as the weight shifted above them. Jake remained perfectly still in his seat. While his classmates huddled together in fear, he watched the ceiling with calm attention. His breathing was controlled and steady. His hands rested on his desk, ready to move quickly if needed. A section of ceiling tiles suddenly crashed down to the floor. Pieces of broken material scattered across the room, and dust filled the air. Through the hole in the ceiling, a large, dark shape began to descend. Vex Shadowclaw dropped into the classroom like a nightmare come to life. He was over 7 feet tall with scales that seemed to absorb the red emergency light. His claws were as long as knives and looked sharp enough to cut through metal. His eyes glowed with a hungry, evil light that made every alien instinct scream, danger. The assassin landed on his feet without making a sound. He moved with the fluid grace of a born killer, every motion calculated and deadly. His forked tongue flicked out to taste the fear in the air, and he smiled with satisfaction. "Well, well," Vex said in a voice like grinding stone. "Look what I have found. A classroom full of important little children." The students pressed together in terror. Some of them were crying, making small sounds of fear. Others were so scared they could not move or speak. Even Professor Thylan, who had seen many dangerous things in his long life, had never faced anything like this. Vex walked slowly around the room, examining each student like a shopper looking at goods in a market. His claws clicked on the floor with each step. His glowing eyes studied faces, trying to decide which ones belonged to the most important families. "Do you know who I am?" the assassin asked. No one answered. They were too frightened to speak. "I am Vex Shadowclaw, the most feared. Hunter in the galaxy. I have killed the children of admirals, the sons and daughters of senators, the heirs to merchant empires. Today I add some of you to that list." He stopped in front of Zara, whose crystal body was flashing through colors so quickly it hurt to look at her. "A Velthari princess, perhaps. Your people are known for their beautiful deaths." Professor Thylan found his voice. "Please, they are just students. They have done nothing wrong." Vex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Wrong? They exist, and their parents make decisions that affect my work. That is enough." The assassin continued his slow walk around the room. He described in detail how he would hunt each student through the academy's halls. He spoke of the terror they would feel, the hopelessness as they tried to hide in places where there was no safety. Throughout this horror, Jake Martinez sat quietly in his corner seat. He had not moved or made a sound since the killer arrived. His brown eyes followed Vex's movements with careful attention, but he showed no fear. To his alien classmates, Jake looked small and helpless. They had always seen him as the weakest being in their class, but something was different about him now, something they could not understand. His breathing remained steady. His hands were still. His eyes held a focus that was completely unlike the panic around him. While everyone else was prey, Jake Martinez was watching a predator with the calm attention of another predator. But none of his classmates noticed this difference. They were too busy being afraid of the monster that had invaded their safe world. They did not realize that the most dangerous creature in the room might not be the one with claws and scales. Vex Shadowclaw continued his terrible game, feeding on their fear and planning his hunt. He had no idea that he was being studied by eyes that had learned to hunt on a world where everything was dangerous. The real terror was about to begin, but not in the way anyone expected. Vex Shadowclaw continued his slow walk around the terrified classroom. He enjoyed the fear that filled the air like a sweet smell. This was what he lived for, the moment when his victims realized they were going to die. "I think I will start with the crystal girl," he said, moving toward Zara. "Velthari break so beautifully when they are scared." Zara's body flashed through every color of terror. She tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. Her people were peaceful and had no experience with violence. She had never imagined anything like this could happen. Professor Thylan stepped forward, his webbed hands spread wide. "Take me instead. I am older and have lived my life. These students have futures ahead of them." Vex laughed again. "How noble. But I do not kill for mercy. I kill for fear, and old professors do not create the same level of panic as young students." The assassin reached toward Zara with one clawed hand. His scales seemed to shimmer with excitement as he prepared to grab her. Then a quiet voice spoke from the back of the room. "Hey." The single word was calm and steady. It cut through the fear like a knife through cloth. Everyone turned to look at Jake Martinez, who had finally stood up from his desk. Vex paused, his hand inches from Zara. He turned to look at the human with amusement. "What did you say, little creature?" Jake took a step forward. His movement was different now, no longer the careful shuffle of a nervous student. It was smooth and balanced, like a hunter moving through tall grass. "I said, hey," Jake repeated, his voice still calm. "You are scaring my classmates." The assassin stared at him with disbelief. This small human was barely 5.5 feet, tall and looked like he weighed less than any other being in the room. Yet he was speaking to Vex Shadowclaw like he was not afraid. "Are you trying to be a hero, human?" Vex asked. "Do you not know who I am?" Jake nodded slowly. "You are Vex Shadowclaw. You kill important people's children because you think it makes you powerful." "Think?" The assassin's voice grew angry. "I am the most feared killer in the galaxy. I have never failed to complete a hunt." "That is interesting," Jake said, taking another step forward. "I have been learning about predators this semester. Want to know what I figured out?" Something changed in the room. The air itself seemed to grow thick and dangerous. The alien students found themselves backing away from Jake, not toward him. Their instincts were screaming warnings, but the warnings were not about Vex anymore. Professor Thylan stared at his human student with new understanding. In all his years of teaching, he had never seen anything like what was happening to Jake Martinez. The young man's brown eyes had become cold and calculating. His relaxed posture was that of someone completely confident in his ability to handle danger. Most frightening of all, he seemed to be enjoying himself. "You see," Jake continued in his calm voice, "I come from what you galactic types call a death world. Do you know what that means?" Vex was no longer smiling. Something in the human's tone made his predator instincts wake up and pay attention. "It means your world is dangerous. It means everything on my world tries to kill everything else," Jake corrected. "The weather kills you, the animals kill you, the plants kill you. Even tiny bacteria that you cannot see will kill you if you let them." Jake took another step forward, and this time Vex took a step back without thinking about it. "So we learned to be better at killing than anything else," Jake said. "We had to, or we would all be dead." The alien students watched in horror as their quiet classmate transformed before their eyes. He was still the same size, still looked physically weak. But something fundamental had changed. The helpless exchange student was gone, replaced by something their ancestral memories recognized as a threat. Zara's crystal body had stopped flashing colors. Now it showed only deep purple, the color of absolute terror. But she was not afraid of Vex anymore. She was afraid of Jake. "You think you are an apex predator," Jake said to the assassin. "But you only hunt children who cannot fight back. You pick victims who have never seen real violence. That does not make you a predator. That makes you a scavenger." Vex's claws extended to their full length. "I will show you what a real predator can do, human," Jake smiled. And that smile was more frightening than anything Vex had done. It was the smile of something that knew it was superior and was looking forward to proving it. "Please do," Jake said. "I have been curious about how galactic predators compare to Earth ones." The assassin lunged forward with incredible speed, his claws aimed at Jake's throat. He was fast enough to catch bullets and strong enough to tear through metal doors. In his mind, the small human was already dead. But Jake was not there when the claws arrived. He had moved to the side with fluid grace, his body bending in ways that seemed impossible. Vex's attack hit only empty air. Before the assassin could recover, Jake was behind him. "Too slow," Jake said quietly. Vex spun around, slashing with both hands. Again, Jake was gone before the attack could land. He moved like water, flowing around the deadly claws without apparent effort. The alien students watched in stunned silence. They had never seen anything move the way Jake was moving. It was not just speed, it was intelligence in motion, every step planned 3 moves ahead. "You know what the difference is between you and an Earth predator?" Jake asked as he continued to avoid Vex's increasingly desperate attacks. "Earth predators do not just use their bodies, they use their minds." Vex was breathing hard now. His attacks were becoming wild and uncontrolled. He had never faced an opponent who could predict his moves and counter them so easily. Jake continued talking in his calm voice while he danced around the deadly claws. "Humans are not the biggest things on Earth. We are not the strongest or the fastest, but we are the smartest. And smart beats big every time." Professor Thylon realized what was happening. Jake was not just avoiding the attacks. He was studying them, learning Vex's patterns and timing. Every movement the assassin made was being recorded and analyzed by a mind that had evolved to hunt. "Humans are persistence hunters," Jake explained as he led Vex in a circle around the classroom. "We do not kill our prey quickly. We chase it until it gets tired, then we move in for the kill." Vex was indeed getting tired. His heavy body was not built for long fights. His attacks were slowing down, becoming easier to avoid. Sweat was running down his scales. For the first time in his career, Vex Shadowclaw was afraid. Not just worried or concerned, but truly afraid. He was facing something his instincts told him was a superior predator, and those instincts were screaming at him to run. But there was nowhere to run. Jake had positioned himself between the assassin and all the exits. Without seeming to try, he had turned the classroom into a trap. "The thing about being from a death world," Jake said as he closed the distance between them, "is that everything there is trying to kill you. So we learned to be better at killing than anything else." His brown eyes held no anger or hate. They were simply cold and focused, like a scientist studying an interesting specimen. In that moment, every alien in the room understood why humans were called Deathworlders. They also understood why most galactic species had agreed to keep humans isolated on their home planet. This was what happened when evolution was driven by constant violence and the need to survive against impossible odds. Vex made one final, desperate attack. Jake stepped aside and grabbed the assassin's extended arm. Using Vex's own momentum against him, he threw the much larger creature across the room. The galaxy's most feared killer hit the wall hard and slumped to the floor. He was still conscious, but no longer able to fight. His predator spirit was broken by meeting something more dangerous than himself. Jake walked over to where Vex lay and looked down at him with those cold, calculating eyes. "On Earth," Jake said quietly, "you would have been prey." Vex Shadowclaw struggled to stand up from where Jake had thrown him. His scales were scratched and his pride was broken. Never in his long career of killing had anyone made him look so helpless. The human had moved around his attacks like they were nothing. Jake stood in the center of the classroom, completely calm. He was not breathing hard or showing any signs of effort. Fighting the galaxy's most feared assassin seemed as easy for him as taking a test. "You want to know something interesting?" Jake asked, his voice still quiet and controlled. "I have been reading about you, Vex. You kill children because adults might fight back. You use fear instead of skill. That tells me everything I need to know about you." The alien students pressed against the walls, trying to stay as far from both fighters as possible. But their fear had shifted completely. They were no longer afraid of the assassin. They were terrified of their human classmate. Zara's crystal body showed deep purple terror, but her eyes were fixed on Jake, not Vex. Crix's logical mind was trying to process what he had just seen, but it went against everything he thought he knew about humans. Professor Thylan watched Jake with the growing understanding that he had been teaching a predator for months without knowing it. All those questions about hunting patterns and survival strategies now made perfect sense. "Stand up," Jake told Vex. "We are not finished yet." The assassin got to his feet slowly. His confidence was gone, replaced by something he had never felt before, real fear for his own life. "What are you?" he whispered. "I am a human," Jake replied simply, "and you made the mistake of threatening things I care about." Jake began walking in a slow circle around Vex. His movements were controlled and purposeful, like a big cat stalking wounded prey. Every step was placed exactly where he wanted it. "You know what makes humans different from other predators?" Jake asked as he circled. "Most predators kill for food or territory. Humans kill for ideas. We kill to protect people we barely know. We kill because someone broke rules we made up. We kill because we decide something is wrong." Vex tried to follow Jake's movement, but the human was staying just outside his attack range. The assassin's head swiveled back and forth like he was watching a tennis match. "That makes us very dangerous," Jake continued, "because you cannot negotiate with an idea. You cannot bargain with someone who has decided you need to die." The human stopped circling and faced the assassin directly. "I have decided you are a threat to my classmates. That makes you a problem I need to solve." Vex lunged again, putting all his remaining strength into one desperate attack. His claws swept through the air where Jake had been standing, but the human had already moved. This time, Jake did not just avoid the attack. He grabbed Vex's wrist and twisted it in a direction it was not meant to go. There was a sharp crack, and the assassin screamed in pain. "Broken wrist," Jake said matter-of-factly. "That will slow down your claw strikes." He released Vex's arm and stepped back to watch the assassin cradle his injured limb. There was no mercy in Jake's eyes, no satisfaction from causing pain. He was simply removing a threat in the most efficient way possible. "Please," Vex gasped. "I will leave. I will never come back to this system." Jake tilted his head like he was considering the offer. "That is an interesting proposal, but I have a better idea." He moved forward again, faster than the aliens could follow. His hand struck Vex's knee with surgical precision. Another crack, and the assassin collapsed as his leg gave out. Shattered kneecap, Jake explained to his terrified classmates. He will not be chasing anyone for a while. Professor Thylan found his voice. Jake, stop, he is defeated. The human turned to look at his teacher. For a moment his eyes were completely alien, cold and calculating like a machine built for killing. Then something human returned to them. You are right, Professor, Jake said. He is no longer a threat. But instead of backing away, Jake knelt down next to the wounded assassin. His voice became conversational, like he was discussing homework. You want to know what humans learned from living on a death world? Jake asked Vex. We learned that being nice is a luxury you can only afford when you are completely in control of the situation. He placed his hand on Vex's throat, not squeezing, but making his point clear. Right now I'm in control. You are lying on the floor with broken bones, and I am deciding whether you live or die. The assassin's eyes were wide with terror. He had gone from hunter to prey in a matter of minutes, and his predator instincts were screaming warnings about the human's touch. But here is the thing, Jake continued. I am not going to kill you. Do you know why? Vex shook his head, unable to speak. Because killing you would upset my classmates, and I do not want to do that. They are good people who deserve to feel safe, so instead, I am going to make sure you never threaten anyone ever again. Jake's hand moved to Vex's shoulder. Another precise strike, another crack of breaking bone. The assassin's right arm went completely numb. Nerve damage, Jake explained. Your arm will never work properly again. He moved to the other shoulder and repeated the process. Vex could no longer feel either of his arms. Now you cannot use your claws, Jake said with satisfaction. A predator without claws is just another animal. The human stood up and brushed dust off his clothes. To his alien classmates, he looked exactly the same as when he had entered the classroom that morning. But they would never see him the same way again. The security forces should be here soon, Jake said to Professor Thylan. They will find Vex unconscious and badly injured. I suggest we tell them he fell through the ceiling wrong and hurt himself. The professor stared at his student. Jake, what you just did. What I just did was protect my friends, Jake interrupted. That is what humans do. We protect the people we care about, no matter what it costs. He looked around at his classmates, who were still pressed against the walls in terror. His expression was sad but not surprised. I know you are all afraid of me now, he said quietly. I understand. What you just saw is why most species do not want humans around. We are good at violence in ways that make others uncomfortable. Zara finally found her voice. Jake, were you always like this? Jake considered the question seriously. I have always been human. Humans are always like this under the surface. We just usually do not have to show it. Sirens could be heard in the distance as security forces finally reached the academy. Jake walked back to his desk and sat down like nothing had happened. I suggest you all sit down too, he said. When security gets here, we were all hiding in fear while the dangerous criminal hurt himself trying to get through the ceiling. The alien students slowly returned to their seats, but they kept as much distance from Jake as possible. They had learned something about humans that would stay with them forever. As the security forces entered the classroom, they found exactly what Jake had predicted. A group of terrified students, a concerned professor, and an unconscious criminal who had apparently injured himself badly during his break-in. But the real lesson had already been taught. The aliens now understood why humans were called Deathworlders, and why some things in the galaxy were better left alone. The security forces filled the classroom with their heavy equipment and bright lights. They were a mix of different species, all trained to handle dangerous situations. But even these experienced officers seemed shaken by what they found. Vex, Shadowclaw, lay unconscious on the floor, his body twisted at wrong angles. The galaxy's most feared assassin looked broken and helpless. Medical teams rushed to stabilize him before transport to the prison medical facility. What happened here? Asked Captain Zorik, the head of Academy Security. His people were known for their ability to sense lies, so everyone had to be careful with their words. Professor Thylan spoke first. The criminal broke through the ceiling. During our class, he threatened the students and tried to attack them. but he must have injured himself badly when he fell through the ceiling tiles. The security captain looked around the room. His eyes paused on each student, reading their fear and stress. When he reached Jake, he frowned slightly. "You, human student. You seem very calm for someone who just faced Vex Shadowclaw." Jake looked up from his desk where he was organizing his notes. "I am still in shock, I think. Sometimes when very bad things happen, people get quiet instead of loud." It was not exactly a lie. Jake was calm but not from shock. Captain Zorik studied him for a moment longer, then moved on to interview other students. The questioning took 2 hours. Each student told the same story. They had been terrified, huddled together while the assassin threatened them. Then Vex had suddenly collapsed from his injuries. No one mentioned what Jake had actually done. After security left with their prisoner, the classroom fell silent. The alien students looked at each other, then at Jake, not sure what to say. Finally, Zara approached his desk. Her crystal body was still showing nervous colors, but she seemed to have found some courage. "Jake," she said quietly, "why did you help us? You could have let him take some of us and saved yourself." Jake finished putting his books in order before answering. "Because you are my friends. Where I come from, you protect your friends. But we are not the same species," Crix pointed out with his logical mind. "Most predators only protect their own kind." "Humans are different," Jake replied. "We make families out of anyone we choose to care about. Species does not matter." Professor Thylin had been listening from his desk. Now he spoke up with a question that had been bothering him. "Jake, all those questions you asked about predators and hunting patterns, you were not just curious, were you?" Jake shook his head. "No, Professor. On Earth, we study everything that might be dangerous. It is how we survive. When I came here, I wanted to understand what threats might exist in galactic space." "And you found one," the professor said. "I prepared for one," Jake corrected. "Humans always prepare for threats, even ones we hope will never come." The days that followed were strange at Nexus Academy. Word of the incident spread quickly, but the official story stayed the same. Vex Shadowclaw had injured himself while breaking into the school and was captured before he could hurt anyone. But among the students, a different story was whispered. They spoke of the human who had moved like liquid death, who had broken the unbreakable killer with his bare hands. The story grew in the telling, becoming legend. Jake continued attending his classes as if nothing had changed. He took notes, asked questions, and ate lunch alone. But now, instead of ignoring him, other students watched him constantly. Some were afraid and kept their distance. Others were curious and wanted to know more about humans and their death world. A few, mostly the children of military families, looked at Jake with something like respect. Zara was one of the curious ones. Despite her fear, she began sitting with Jake at lunch again. Their conversations were different now, more honest and direct. "Do all humans fight like you do?" she asked one day. "Most humans could do what I did," Jake replied. "We all learn to protect ourselves and others. It is part of growing up on Earth. Are there many like Vex in the galaxy?" Jake nodded. "There are always predators who target the weak, but now there is one less." Professor Thylin also treated Jake differently after the incident. During lessons about predator behavior, he would sometimes look at Jake and ask for his thoughts. The human's insights were always accurate and sometimes disturbing. "Predators often test their prey before attacking," Jake said during one class. "They want to know if their target will fight back. Most give up if they meet real resistance." The professor nodded. "And what about predators who do not give up?" "Those are the dangerous ones," Jake replied. "But they are also usually the ones who have never met anything more dangerous than they are." 3 weeks after the incident, Jake was called to the Academy Director's office. Director Valen was an ancient being whose species had helped found the Galactic Council. His wisdom was respected across known space. "Sit down, Mr. Martinez," the director said. His voice was kind, but serious. "We need to discuss what really happened in Professor Thylin's classroom." Jake sat quietly and waited. He had expected this conversation eventually. The official story is that Vex Shadowclaw injured himself, Director Valen continued. But medical reports show his injuries were too precise to be accidental. Someone with medical knowledge attacked specific nerve points and joints. That is interesting, Jake said neutrally. The director smiled slightly. Indeed, it suggests that someone in that classroom had combat training, someone who knew exactly how to disable a dangerous opponent without killing him. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Director Valen leaned forward. Mr. Martinez, I am not going to ask you what really happened, but I want you to know that this academy is grateful for whatever protection was provided to our students that day. Jake nodded but said nothing. However, the director continued, I think it would be best if you completed your exchange program at a different institution. Your classmates seem to have developed some anxiety about continuing their studies with you present. Jake had expected this too. I understand, sir. When would you like me to leave? Take your time. Finish out the semester if you wish. But perhaps it would be better for everyone if you return to Earth after that. That evening, Jake sat in his room writing in his journal. He thought about his time at the academy and what he had learned about galactic society. The other species are not weak, he wrote. They are just not used to real violence. They have built a civilization based on cooperation and trust. That is actually quite impressive. He paused and looked out his window at the peaceful gardens. But they need protectors too, even if they do not realize it. There will always be predators like Vex who try to take advantage of peaceful people. Someone has to stop them. Jake closed his journal and prepared for bed. Tomorrow there would be more classes, more careful conversations with frightened classmates, more pretending to be just a normal exchange student. But he had learned something important at Nexus Academy. He had learned that humans had a role to play in galactic society, even if that role made others uncomfortable. Somewhere in the galaxy there were other predators planning to hurt innocent people. When they made their moves, they might find that humans were not as isolated as they thought. And they would learn, as Vex Shadowclaw had learned, that evolution on a death world creates something very dangerous when it is threatened. Jake Martinez went to sleep knowing that his classmates would never look at humans the same way again. Some would fear them, others would respect them, but none would ever underestimate them. In the end, that was probably for the best. The galaxy was a big place with many dangers. It was good for everyone to know that somewhere out there on a small blue world lived a species that had learned to be very, very good at protecting the things they cared about, even if that protection sometimes looked like terror to those who had never needed to fight for their survival.